Good morning, everybody. I take a great pleasure in inviting you to the last lesson of the AAOS orthoplasty course. I request all arriving members to mute their mics when they join to avoid disturbance. Dr. Divakar, Dr. Divakar, am I
Yes,
audible?
yes, you are very much audible, very clear.
Yes. So I invite all the participants as well as guest visitors of today for this talk, which I assure you, you will find extremely interesting and entertaining. Let me share my screen. There we go. And here's my screen. And that's my talk. Place slideshow in the window. 1 minute. Good. That comes here. That comes here. Today's topic is titled Unlearning to Learn. And as this is the last class of our biological methods class course, this talk will not only give you a gist of what you have learned, but also tell you the background story of how I unlearned to learn. It is correctly said that it is not where you are that matters, but what you do that matters. So, as Epictetus said, it is impossible for a man to learn what he thinks he already knows. Meaning, our overbelief in certain methods and philosophies makes us blind to the possibilities beyond those methods and philosophies. This traces my journey in orthopedic world over the last 40 years and also narrates my present experiences which made me relearn these methods. In this talk, I would share a few of those lessons which I believe have made me a better orthopedic surgeon and a clinician. My life as an orthopedic surgeon went through three phases: a surgeon, a prisoner, and a teacher. The teacher is the current phase, and each phase taught me invaluable lessons. From 1980 to 2000, I was a very reputed surgeon. I was an AO man. I was a prolific surgeon. I fixed every fracture. There is a picture of me operating in Malaysia in 87, 88. And there is a picture of me with Mr. Goodfellow of England, the inventor of the Oxford knee. And this is Nora Walker. This is another great in orthopedics. In that phase, I learned that surgical treatment of fractures produces superior results of non-operative management. Perfection of X-rays is directly proportional to the quality of results. In this phase, I also learned that a good orthopedic surgeon is the one who operates on a large number of cases, and arthroplasty is the ultimate achievement for an orthopedic surgeon. In this phase, I also learned that AO is the best thing that has happened to fracture management, and I understood that you learn the best of orthopedics by fellowships in high-tech, higher specialty international centers. In this phase, I was also taught that more sophisticated your diagnostic tools, CT, MRI, etc., more accurate is your diagnosis. Then came the second phase from 2001 to 2013. I was a convict prisoner, no facilities in the prison. And obviously, if at all I treated someone, I had to treat them non-operatively. Here, the lessons I learned were quite different. And I realized that many of my previous learnings were wrong. Surgical treatment of fractures produces superior results. No, this is wrong. Here is an X-ray of a prisoner who fell down from a tree and sustained a shaft of femur, which was managed conservatively, and the chap went on to play football in 2.5 months' time. Again, it is wrong to say that only arthroplasty surgeons are the pinnacle or the top of orthopedic practice. I do complex revisions and arthroplasties, but that doesn't make me as proud as this book which I wrote in combination with Sarmiento on non-operative methods. Now I have revised my mind and I can say that I do not think that the AO is the best thing that has happened to fracture management. I may not go to the extent of saying AO is the worst thing that has happened to fracture management, as my close friend Dr. Divakar would confidently say time and again, but I would say that AO is like salt. You need very little salt in your food to make it delicious and palatable. Any more, your food will become useless to eat. This, of course, I learned very correctly that most of these diagnostic tools are useless. You need proper clinical examination and history to get the correct diagnosis. These days, we have even come to know that a prolapsed disc on an MRI is not related to the patient's symptoms whatsoever. The SLR diminution is not because of a prolapsed disc seen in an MRI. I will come and tell you about this a little later. From 2015, I was released in February 2015. The last 5 years, I've dedicated my life to teaching and performing complex surgical procedures. The lessons I learned were rather invaluable, and my experiences gathered from studying a few thousand individuals in a closed environment with 100% follow-up to tell me if my methods worked. These are the experiences. 1 minute. These are my experiences of practicing orthopedics in those times with limited or no facilities, treating desperate patients who had nowhere else to go. We are not allowed to carry X-rays out of prison, so I have no pictures of fractures, but I maintain meticulous records on which this talk is based. I traced the X-rays, made charcoal drawings, and kept a follow-up of the patients. I spent 4,831 days in prison. I saw an average of 11,200 patients, meaning about 3 patients on average on a day. Majority of my practice was conservative management and intra-articular injections, though I even managed to remove 1 or 2 implants under local anesthesia, did suturing, and referral finally, a short number I had to refer to Medical College Hospital. In prison, there is no X-ray machine, there are no plaster bandages, no traction items, no lignocaine or local anesthesia without special permission, and no anesthetic drugs, sedatives or tranquilizers with permission either. Very, very limited suture material and absolutely no other facilities. Other uniqueness was when I was taken out of my cell, I had to treat the patient through the bars because I would not be allowed to enter the other prisoners' rooms, and the wardens, officials, and other prison people wanted to consult me during night time after I was locked up. I would be on this side of the bar and they would be consulting me from across the bars. Doing a blood sugar through the prison bars is easy. I had the sugar testing machine and I used to test it routinely. Taking a BP is a little tricky. Doing an injection for a patient through the bar is almost like a circus or yoga, both for the patient and doctor. The pictures by the side are all drawn by me, and I'll tell you the story of how I came to draw them a little later. Now, just imagine reducing a dislocated shoulder through the prison bars. It is indeed unfortunate that I could not have taken any pictures of me reducing shoulder through prison bars. However, my experiences led to the discovery of a new method of reduction of shoulder, a simple and easy method. So, from stitching a torn ear to two methods of shoulder reductions and fracture management, I learned many things in prison. The newspaper report on the right it tells about a jailer's son who had almost torn his ear in a school and was rushed to Apollo Hospital. Plastic surgeon gave a quotation of 50,000 rupees for reattaching the ear. The ear was bandaged and he was brought back to the jailer, who in a panic situation met me in the night. I checked in the hospital supplies and found that my very thin suture, 6-0 or so, used by ophthalmic surgeons was available. And under local anesthesia, I sutured the boy. And later, when the newspapers came to know of it, they published an article on the right. Here is a message from Pakistan. Sir, every time we reduce the shoulder in the OPD without anesthesia or analgesia, we ask the patient to pray for you. The 7 unusual things which I am going to share with you today in this talk are: number 1, a new method of shoulder reduction; 2, distal sodium channel blocks and portals; 3, extension casting of humerus and forearm bones; 4, proximal fibular osteotomy as an alternative to TKR in select cases; 5, steroids orally as an alternative for fasciotomy in compartment syndrome; 6, role of non-operative fracture management; 7, my non-operative orthopedic experiences in prison, including reversal of heart disease and diabetes. First is my method of reduction of shoulder dislocations. This has been published now not only by me but also by many others. The method is very simple. It is a modification of Cocker's method. I discovered this by accident in prison. The index case was 3-month-old dislocation. Over 96 methods of shoulder reduction are described in the literature, and most of them are wrong. Pull the shoulder in has been the philosophy. Traction, traction, traction. Traction is considered the most important component, is the most unnecessary and disruptive factor. You can see a person hoisted by a giant pulling his shoulder while another person is hanging on his body. This is an illustration from an old medical text as to how to reduce the shoulder joint. Every method in literature uses traction. In my method, there is no traction, no anesthesia, no assistant, no outpatient. It is an outpatient procedure which works most of the time. I think most of the people who are attending this talk would be aware of this method or would have used it once or twice. I'll quickly rush through the steps. The patient sits on a chair and the scapula is stabilized. The arm is externally rotated to the maximum extent. You wait for a while for the muscle to relax. Then you adduct and internally rotate the shoulder. Without clicks, clunks, or noises, the shoulder will glide in majestically. We can see grateful patients instant after their shoulders have been reduced. This short video of 60 seconds will show you how I reduce the shoulder. This was my Nepali servant in Chennai house, cook, who slipped in the bathroom, dislocated his shoulder. That is my garden. I just externally rotate the adducted shoulder to the maximum extent. Keep holding it in sustained external rotation. My Rajapalayam dog in the bag wants to see how I reduce the shoulder and he's keenly observing the procedure. I now adduct and internally rotate. You look at his face and you look at his smile, and there you realize that the shoulder has been reduced. This is another short video which I'll quickly rush through. It has been made very as recently as day before yesterday. 1 minute. It works. Forward, forward. Okay. So different people are demonstrating the method, and you can see that it is real time without any screams by the patients from different parts of the world, from different institutions, under different surroundings. Each surgeon finds the procedure consistent and producing always reduction. We can see from the background and we can see from the surgeons, we all come from different places, and the smile on the patient's face when we see the shoulder glide in without force is in itself one of the best rewards the patient can get. And this one is from Pakistan. Anyway, the method I have just explained to you, it works for everyone. When I first published this method or sent it for publication, it was to the Indian Journal of Orthopedics, and the reviewers ridiculed my paper. They laughed at it, they said there's nothing new in it, and some people clearly did not believe that it can work or shoulders can be reduced painlessly without anesthesia. Then it became a subject of curiosity. This is Gujarat Orthopedic Conference in 2018. The L. Prakash method hype. Any method is good for the first time. Slowly, acceptance came. A French surgeon now says that 200 years after Cocker and 4,000 years after Hippocrates, a new method has come which is revolutionary. And very recently from USA, in emergency medicine resident is using the Prakash method. So now even in developed countries, this method of shoulder reduction is being followed. Now this is an article from Turkey which has been published in a peer-reviewed journal. This is another article in Chinese Journal of Traumatology, again on my method, published by an independent surgeon. As per available records, more than 100,000 shoulders in 31 countries have been reduced so far. 12 orthopedic surgeons have got their shoulders reduced by this method. It has been successfully used in football fields, kabaddi grounds, Xerox shop, market, pavement, church, court, temple festival, swimming pool, and even a supermarket. So try this method once if you have not tried it before summoning the anesthetist. Next subject, which I am going to appraise you, is about proximal fibular osteotomy. This is based on the structure of tibia, the non-compressive lateral compartment, lateral column of the knee, and the compressive medial column of the knee, which leads to gradual trabecular collapse and medial compartment osteoarthritis of the knee with varus deformity, which is very common in Indian patients. I accidentally discovered this in prison. Prisoners who broke their fibular shafts due to prison violence were suddenly cured of medial OA pain. Cops are always taught to hit below the knee to avoid grievous injuries. And when they swing the baton from either side, the first structure to hit the baton is the fibula, which breaks just below the neck. Here we had a patient who had a fibular fracture about 20 years ago, and you can see that his medial compartment has no arthritis. Look at its opposite side, and already you can see the sclerosed margins and advanced stage of medial compartment arthritis. This means when a nature breaks the fibula, it protects the medial compartment from becoming arthritic. This is just a corollary. You can see this is a exostosis in a young boy of 24 years of age. And even by 24, 25, he has started developing medial compartment arthritis because here the lateral column has been lengthened. He's a very small child which has got an exostosis, but again, as the lateral column is lengthening, you can see the appearance of medial compartment arthritis. This proves that if the lateral column is elongated, the pressure on the medial joint compartment space becomes greater. If the lateral column is shortened, medial joint line automatically opens up. See this X-ray. This is a 55-year-old gynecologist with severe pain, difficulty in stair climbing, difficult to stand for prolonged periods and perform surgeries, and was advised TKR in one center, UK in one center. I am rather surprised that nobody bothered to offer her even a high tibial osteotomy, meaning everybody wanted to replace the knee. This is what I did. Immediately after surgery, the medial joint line opened up. The patient was walking and doing stairs on the very same day. She's a busy gynecologist who has to stand for hours to perform her surgeries. And 2 years down the line, now she's 5 years down the line. She's standing, performing 5 surgeries a day. She had walked up to Vaishno Devi and she would not dream of a TKR now. This is my own patient, my aunt, whom I had done in 2008 when I had come out on parole. She was already admitted in a corporate hospital for bilateral knee replacement. She escaped at the last moment. I did a PFO, and that's her almost 12 years later, totally pain-free, squatting, very comfortable, not wanting surgery. There are examples galore. You can see this patient was sent to me for bilateral knee replacement. I thought that the right side can be replaced. The left side, I did a PFO, and he is messaging me during Diwali saying that he cannot find the difference in pain between the right and left side, and he doesn't even remember which side had total knee and which side had a PFO. Only the scars telling the side where the knee was replaced. This is another X-ray from a colleague, and more than the X-rays, the relief of the patient was dramatic. I did not publish it in any medical journal. I just posted it on social media, and that started a trend amongst many young surgeons who started doing it in large numbers. Soon an MS thesis was allotted, and surgeons from world over started doing this. Satisfied surgeons sent testimony, and doctors, relatives, orthopedic surgeons initially formed the majority of my patients. Even in UK, by doing an associated PFO, you can open up the medial joint and get away without putting a thicker bearing or cutting more of the medial compartment. So this was a friend from Turkey who told me this example. By now, the procedure had become popular world over. Many people from various countries started reading, understanding, and appreciating it. However, a large number of indiscriminate and wholly unnecessary PFOs were being done without understanding the correct indications and the specific contraindications, leading to a bad name for the procedure. I am spelling out the correct indications. Isolated medial compartment arthritis of the knee with a varus deformity not exceeding 12 degrees. 2. Normal lateral compartment and near normal patellofemoral joint. At least 2 mm joint space in the medial compartment on weight-bearing X-rays. Tricompartmental, gross varus, fixed flexion deformity, obese patients are all contraindications, including bone-on-bone disease. We just remove a small piece of fibula, about 7 to 9 centimeters below the fibular head, and immediate post-op, you can see the joint widens up. The level is this, which is marked with a scale. We normally make a drill hole, attach a tap on a T-handle into the hole, use a drill bit to cut above and below, sorry, use a saw blade to cut above and below and remove the piece. However, to understand and know more fully about this, a double or triple blind study of PFO versus sham surgery needs to be performed. Medium to long term relief offered by PFO versus unicompartmental arthroplasty. I have done a lot of cases with TKR on one side and PFO on the other, and so far had to only do a TKR in one patient, and we can add PFO to UK. Finally, our paper was published in a very famous peer-reviewed journal where we discussed the biomechanical aspects, and the future is bright provided indiscriminate surgeries in unindicated patients is avoided. So keep this as an arsenal in your practice, use it in select cases judiciously, and you will not be dissatisfied with the results. Next is extension casting of the shaft of the humerus. Before my arrest, I operated on all shaft of humerus by AO methods. Surgery is not undertaken on a prisoner unless it's a life-threatening condition. So the burden of conservatively treating all humeral fractures in prison came to me. I made some unusual observations about humerus fractures treated conservatively. Fractures treated with elbow inflection always malunited unless undisplaced, and on occasions went into non-union due to plaster distraction. Those treated with elbow in extension in full supination for a short while in long arm cast invariably united soon. Biceps and triceps during flexion and extension. So you can see from the drawing, biceps does not attach to the humerus. It is a humerus sparing muscle, meaning from scapula to radius, it bypasses the humerus. Whereas triceps is attached over almost a great extent of the shaft of the humerus, and thus biceps is a disruptive muscle, while triceps is a protective muscle. The instant the biceps contracts and the elbow is flexed, what happens? Distal fragment goes posteriorly. The instant you stretch the elbow and let gravity adjust things, the piece automatically goes in place. So in my view, all these methods of managing a humerus fracture are wrong. Textbooks are wrong. UCAS are wrong. U-slabs and bandages are wrong. You can see on the left, a U-slab with an elbow flexion displaces. The instant you extend it, automatically it falls in place. This also works for radial fractures. You can see a fracture of the radius, the instant it is put in extension cast, it automatically stabilizes. And in 13 years, I treated 56 cases, all followed up to 3 years or longer. All fractures united, 30 out of 56 united with little shortening. Elbow movements were full at 6 months in every case. Full return of function within an average of 2.5 months. And average time of clinical union was 9 weeks. This really surprised me because in the past, I never believed that humerus will unite non-operatively. I thought that Eva taught me right. They have all to be plated, fixed. Conservatively treated humeral fractures never go into non-union if treated in extension cast. Full return to function in 3 months. Lightweight axilla to metacarpal head long cast in supination and full extension, which has to be converted to an extension cylinder in 3 to 4 weeks and begin elbow movements. And the fracture unites in 8 weeks. With heavy, cumbersome U-slabs, fracture will displace and either malunite or have a tendency to go into non-union. In extension, what is displaced automatically gets reduced. Minor imperfections in reduction are taken care of by gravity, which will reduce it subsequently slowly. You can see at injury with a flexion slab, elbow inflection, and there, the instant we let it hang, by 7th day, automatically gravity has reduced the fracture. Over 250 surgeons these days are using this technique. Exuberant callus is seen soon. That's a fracture. That's the crying patient immediately after a cast application because she's not able to lift the hand. There she is in a week, and you can see how she's raising her hand, and that's it, fully united, changed to a arm cast. That's her after removal of the cast. So the principle is same. We just do an above elbow, initial stages converted to below elbow in initial stages, converted to an above elbow once the fracture gets sticky. This to this, and the fracture will go on to uneventful and complete union with full function of the patient. Now you decide whether you need a situation like this, or a situation like this, or one like this, or one like this, or one like this. More I see these horrors, the more I coin the aphorism, keep two ends of humerus in the same room and they will unite unless an orthopedic surgeon enters the room. So you have to choose whether you want this type of a result in less than 1.5 months or this type of result at the end of 1.5 years. Segmentals, long obliques, spirals, comminateds, they do fantastically well non-operative and they do very badly operatively. I repeat again, keep two ends of humerus in the same room and they will unite unless an orthopedic surgeon enters that room. The extension principle also works in forearm fractures, and Dr. Divakar and myself have coined a phrase, flexion displaces, gravity corrects. Here is a forearm fracture which is displaced in flexion. The instant the arm is straightened and elbow is extended, it falls in place. Another child with a minimally displaced fracture was cast in flexion, and as usual in flexion and such bulky plasters, it displaced, causing anguish and anxiety to the parents. It was just changed to extension and automatically the fracture got into place. So there's the child in the extension cast immediately after removal, and see there's no deformity. And immediately after removal of the cast, you can see full flexion, full extension, full supination, and full pronation. So this is wrong. Abandon this, unlearn this. This is right. Learn this. Next is extension principle plus gravity work for all major limb injuries. Flexion displaces, extension and gravity correct. Another interesting prison study, I had an opportunity to monitor and study a group of 67 patients with CT or MRI proven intervertebral disc prolapse, meaning they were confirmed disc patients, and I could observe the three modalities and the long-term effects. Those patients who had an MRI proven single or multiple level raise prior to arrest, and they had to be convict prisoners so that they could be observed for 7 years or more. So the age distribution was almost uniform from 20 to almost 60. So, and the highest were within the 40 to 50 age group. About 28% had already had laminectomies or microdiscectomies outside, while 21% had an epidural injection either in the prison or outside. The balance of 50% received no treatment whatsoever. All operative cases were operated by orthopedic and neurosurgeons outside the prison. Conservative treated group was either treated by me or received no treatment at all. Now we finally evaluated by visual rating scale, Oswestry disability index, and visual analog scale. And if you see, you can see here that surgery is most disastrous with complications in 40% of patients. So less than 6 out of 10 were satisfied when they had a surgery for the disc at the end of 10 years. Whereas only 11% were dissatisfied with the mode of treatment when no treatment was given. So the so-called prolapsed disc, if left untreated, does better at 10 years. So there is no difference between epidural injection and no treatment. And surgery gave worse results with complications in 19% of the patients. When I came out of the prison, I came out wiser with two lessons on my mind. Never operate on any prolapsed disc, and even those discs with neurological deficit or bladder problems should automatically become normal after some time with or without treatment. Later, I searched literature and found that there was a Cochrane review which clearly said that there is no scientific evidence on any form of surgical decompression or fusion for degenerative lumbar disc prolapse compared with natural history, placebo, or conservative management. And active conservative management is extremely effective in patients who normally qualify them for surgery, again published in Spine. So according to me, the principal indications for disc surgery will be holiday for surgeon and spouse, college admission for surgeon's son, a new car or a holiday home, or possibility of even a speedboat if he operates on every back. This is what I call Prakash balls over brains ratio, or the scrotocerebral index. Scrotum by cerebrum into 100, while our testosterone urges us to rush into surgery, cerebral serotonin urges caution. We must make our choices wisely in the interest of benefit for the patients. After this, I got in touch with Dr. Arvind Divakar and Dr. Gore, and then began a new era of treating sciaticas and PID with sodium channel blockers. This is now being followed by numerous surgeons in more than 15 countries today. Here, 0.5% lignocaine is injected into specific portals, which causes dramatic relief from a wide variety of conditions. The neurogenic conditions that are amenable to DSCB or distal sodium channel blocks are low back pain with sciatica, hamstring spasm, coccygodynia, cervical brachialgia, wry neck, spastic and acute torticollis. Myofascial conditions like supraspinatus tendinitis, rotator cuff impingements and tears, tennis elbow, golfer's elbow, plantar fasciitis and heel spurs. Traumatic conditions like fractured neck of humerus, fractured clavicle, scapula, shoulder injuries, including dislocations, neck of femur and trochanteric fractures, tibial and ankle fractures, rib and spine injury fractures. DSCB provides immediate and sustained pain relief in fractures and dislocations, making patient transport, X-ray, etc. very easy, and eliminates the need for post-fracture management analgesia. DSCB trauma blocks can be repeated every 5 days, and a single injection gives sustained pain relief for 4 to 5 days. This has led to revolutionary trauma management methods. This is a small video which shows. Good evening, everybody. This is an interesting case which I am going to present for you. A trochanteric fracture, 76-year-old, unfit surgically, and I'm going to explain beta 6 blocks, the new revolution in orthopedics. This is a patient with an intertrochanteric fracture who was on bed for 2 days. He's explaining that his hip has broken. He was advised surgery, not able to get up and walk from bed, in extreme pain and in a lot of discomfort. This case would have been managed by intertrochanteric fixations, by a DHS or a PFN. This patient was in Chennai, and I advised my nurse to give a beta 6 portal injection of just 0.5% lignocaine with 30 microgram of clonidine.
The point of injection is lateral to the femoral nerve. We aspirate to ensure that we are not in the vessel, and the needle doesn't tingle the nerve to ensure that we are not in the nerve. And the injection has been administered. There's a real-time video showing you exactly how and why the procedure is being performed. This may be a concept which may not be understood or may not be accepted by orthopedic surgeons. Even the patient says that when so many people have advised me surgery, how is it that you are guaranteeing or assuring that my fracture will join without operation? This is about 10 minutes after the injection. The patient already feels confident. And when he keeps his heel for the first time on a footstool, he is very happy because he has not kept his heel on the stool for a period of 72 hours. And he says that yes, the feeling of my foot on the floor is really dramatic and I'm feeling happy. So this beta 6 block was so magical and wonderful.
Happy Gilmore.
So this beta 6 block was so wonderful
Scooby-Doo.
that he not only has complete pain relief from the fracture, but there is no numbness or no sensory loss in his lower limb below the hip, which is the actual magic of the beta 6 blocks. As you can see, the patient is hesitant, having not walked for a long time, and today he is attempting to walk without surgery.
Sorry. I have to go back. Oh, shit. 1 minute. What? Yes. Here we are. My request to new joiners, please mute your mic, because when I go to mute my mic, there's something
This
happens
video
here.
was shot by
There
my
he is
nurse
immediately
and
after.
sent to me a short while ago, asking me what should be the next step of management. I just said, let him use a walker and walk home.
So that is
Thank you.
that one. Then these blocks can also be used for miscellaneous conditions like migraine, abdominal pain, uterine colic, renal colic, corona, diarrhea, asthmatic distress with. Now this is addition because we had a small power disruption in the morning, and when I was converting the slides, I found that certain bit of recording 10 minutes is missing. So I'm going to just record that segment for posting the complete file. There we go. No. The miscellaneous conditions where the Porter blocks can be used are for migraine, abdominal pain, uterine colic, renal colic, asthmatic disorders with bronchospasm. Dr. Divakar and myself have identified 4 types of portals: the alpha portals or the upper limb portals, the beta portals or the lower limb portals, the tau portals, the trunk portals, and caput portals or the head and neck portals. Quite soon, hundreds of surgeons started using distal sodium channel blocks in their routine day-to-day practice, and the results were no less than spectacular. So, we wrote a book called The Physiological Pain Portals, which has become almost a bestseller and is very, very popular amongst orthopedic surgeons. The Indian Academy of Orthopedic Surgeons also conducted a 3-month certificate course in DSCB pain portals, and to date, 33 surgeons from various countries have completed the course. The second uh, batch of this course shall be starting in the coming week. Back to the present experiences, because I had a large pool of subjects in a closed environment, this enabled me to conduct numerous studies. Among other studies, I also performed physical and anthropometric measurements of over 10,000 inmates and prison officials. One of the studies enabled me to understand knee sizes and plan the ideal dimensions for a TKR implant for an Indian population spread, leading to the manufacture of what is called Lara knee, a knee implant which was being sold for 12,500 rupees for the 3 components. The first study I did in the prison was study of Indian knee sagittal and coronal positions. This was conducted over 12 years and 14,000 Indian males were studied, including prisoners and prison staff. And we found that more than 50% of Indian knees are in varus. Means 7,600 out of 14,000 were in varus. Valgus knees were very less, and neutral knees accounted for about 1/3. So, varus knee is common. We also found that the varus progressed with age, meaning older patients had more varus, older volunteers had more varus, younger volunteers had less varus. And very, very logical finding that there is a serious correlation between symptoms of medial compartment OA and knee varus. All patients with varus above 25-30 degrees were symptomatic of medial compartment osteoarthritis. We also found that when we followed up 1,600 patients progressively over 10 years, these are life prisoners who were not going out for long periods. And so periodically, every 6 months, I used to measure the knee. And we found that the rate of progression of varus is 1 to 2 degrees per year and progressed exponentially with age. A very, very important finding. So the observations that I had from my prison anthropometric studies are more than 50% of Indian knees have a varus disposition, though not all varus knees had symptoms of medial compartment OA. Severity of symptoms has a direct correlation to the degree of varus, and after 30 degrees, all knees are symptomatic, and varus of the knee gradually and progressively increases with age. So once a knee is in varus disposition, it will go into more and more varus as the patient becomes older and older. It was these observations that led to the development of both PFO, about which I've spoken earlier, and also about Lara knee, which I have now discontinued manufacturing because I'm planning to sell the company. Where we go. Now, after that, based on these observations, after my release, I began to design a knee, especially for the Indian patients, which would be low-cost knee and which should suit our anatomy. The design process was done using my knowledge of knee arthroplasty. You can see the handwritten drawings and how they are computer generated and how we are getting AutoCAD files. And I used a large number of cadaveric bones, a few hundreds of tibia and a few hundreds of femurs to understand the human anatomy and move forward. After the instruments and implants were developed, we conducted numerous workshops for young surgeons who wanted to learn the fine art of knee arthroplasty. Then comes the development of non-operative fracture management, the concepts and topic of this course, because this is the world's first course on non-operative management and the first 4-month course, online course, attended by close to 40 participants from 9 countries. Before imprisonment, I was treating every fracture surgically. While in prison, every fracture was treated non-operatively. What next after release and resuming my practice? That was a burning question in my mind. Once I resumed practice, I found myself in a dilemma and at a crossroads. Newer implants like distal radial locking plate, Philos, clavicle plate, distal femoral locking plate, etc., had made their appearance. Fracture management had become extremely commercial. My prison experience of fracture management were entirely opposite of what I had learned from Campbell and Yeo earlier. And these new instruments and implants had a philosophy of fix every bone, including clavicle and humerus. So I was torn by conflicting thoughts. One side were my observations in prison, which told me that every single fracture can be treated non-operatively. And here we have Campbell and Evo advising us to operate on every single fracture. Who was correct? Should I buy all the latest trauma systems, instruments, and implants? Should I upskill myself and rejoin the rat race? And frankly, I was a little confused by the newer implants and fix every bone philosophy because I had seen complication-free certain union by non-operative methods. So the second question was, should I build upon my prison experiences and transform myself into a surgeon who had faith in nature and wanted to work with synergism with biology? Which was the right choice for me? The burning question was, should I be a carpenter or should I be a gardener in my second innings? My trauma experiences in prison were not too profound or in very large numbers, but I had 100% follow-up till the end stage of union and function in every single fracture that I treated. I treated 1,278 fractures in 14 years. That would average about 10 fracture cases in a month, minor and major, which was good enough for a 14,000 capacity prison. And to make a correct decision, after coming out, I reread Charnley and Sarmiento. So much so that the publishers of Charnley's book, for a close treatment, have put a picture of Charnley's total hip replacement, which has nothing to do with biological management of fractures. However, the text of these two books, Charnley and Sarmiento, were classics, and they are the foundation stone of modern non-operative fracture management methodology. Reading the two books gave me tremendous confidence, and I decided to change my treatment protocols totally. Though I would continue to perform arthroplasties, Ilizarov surgeries, and revisions, I decided not to operate on a fracture unless extremely necessary. It was at this stage that I was in contact with two great orthopedic scientists who entered my life through social media and internet connections. To my left is Augusto Sarmiento, the legend, the father of modern non-operative methods of fracture management. And to my right is Dr. Arvind Divakar Jain from Lalitpur, who is one of the master conservative surgeons in India. The rest, as we say, is history, and the book on biological methods was authored by Professor Augusto Sarmiento, and the biological course, this course which you are participating, came into existence. Dr. Sarmiento occasionally joins our meetings and listens to the talks, and this was an email from him by the end of October or I think early November. He says, "My dear Dr. Friend Prakash, a marvelous and comprehensive lecture. You never cease to amaze me with your incredible knowledge. For some time, I have suspected that sooner or later, the place and role of non-surgical care of fractures will return." Very important sentence. "The powerful orthopedic industrial complex, driven by profit, will surrender its wrongly claimed merits. the credit for such historical event will unequivocally go to you. A prison leaves you with plenty of time, and though I could see 2 or 3 patients every day, I had the rest of the time free in my hands. A workaholic like me, accustomed to 12 to 15-hour work days, could simply not sit idle in the prison. So I began to learn things other than orthopedics. So first I started writing books. I wrote close to 106 books, which means 25 million handwritten words. You can see all these registers full of my writings. I wrote fiction, non-fiction, mythological, adventure stories, legal thrillers, sensational novels, and detective novels. Here are a few of my published books of various genres. This one on the left is a detective story, Nurse and a Spy. One on the right is science fiction, which blends Mahabharata with the land of dinosaurs. Mindbenders is is a book on modern science fiction methodology, and somebody has not.
ఎవరు టీవీ చూడరా
Uh,
ఏంది 10
We're still members who are not muting. Please mute your audio. I'm not able to hear. Good. Please mute your audios. I wrote about my prison experiences. I wrote a book called Seeing is Not Believing, which is a detective work. I was then bitten with a art bug and started doing watercolor paintings. So I painted various scenarios on watercolor, and this helped me to do my illustrations for my books properly. And at this time, the selfie bug hit the world, and I was in a small cell, even without proper electricity. So only this much portion was left to be shared, and the same has been shared, and we will add the recording so that I can upload it today. Thank you. This computer, yes. So I learned watercolor paintings, and I started making watercolors. Later, when the selfie bug hit, I was not able to take a selfie because no cameras allowed in prison. So I started drawing my own pictures and painting them to produce my selfies. So these are my watercolor selfies, which you can see here. And these are my charcoal sketches, by which I learned how to make the faces. And then I moved on to caricatures. I drew the whole Ramayana in watercolors. And this has helped me to illustrate our books. This is how I make drawings for any orthopedic book that I write. This one is a book on Elizarov, which has been recently published. And by just watercolors and brush, we can produce letter-like drawings, which makes the book extremely interesting for all to watch. And that is the final completed picture, which I have drawn. So as it finishes, it looks elegant. Next stage was sculpting, where I learned the nuances of three-dimensional art and depth. And I made 100 sculptures in a period of 150 days, making one sculpture every 1.5 days. That's my bronze sculpture work, all cast in bronze. And this helped me to design and make the prototypes of the knee implants, which I eventually launched. And this was one of the ingeniously made knee wear testing machine that I made. International machines were costing in crores. And even a single knee wear test was costing hundreds of dollars. This is made out of a ceiling fan, can run indefatigably for months together, and can do millions of cycles of knee. After that, I did a lot of material research. This is the one on the left is a rubber product. One on the right is a die molding rubber. Then I invented Pra clay, an air drying polymer clay with numerous applications. So these are some designs made out of my clay called the Pra clay or Prakash clay, which is a patented material useful for arts and other things. Then I made latex molding material, wherein we could mold the sculptures. Later, I developed a technology for making cinema special effects, and the prison had a division to make special effects for movie people, This helped me in also fabricating an artificial limb for a patient, a cosmetic upper limb, and later the same knowledge helped me to make models for conference, silicon models for conference and workshops, which are now used by most of our conferences. This is a very important point. My experiments in non-surgical reversal of heart disease and diabetes. My history in prison was a little strange. That's me in 2008 at 51 years, 86 kilograms, asymptomatic, smoke 20 cigarettes per day, 1 liter of coffee with milk and sugar, 6 chapatis, sabji, dal, and yogurt was my food. But I kept on bloating, and by 52 became 91 kilos. And though my food was the same, my condition deteriorated. My HbA1c was 13.2. Please mute your mics. My random blood sugar was 316. My lipid profile was screwed. And there was even an extent of showing inferior wall ischemia in 1 minute, yes. In one of the ECGs that was taken those times. Then
You'll need to unlock your iPhone.
at this
first.
stage, I needed to do something to avoid a triple vessel coronary angioplasty advised by a cardiothoracic surgeon, because I had to get back to the prison and do something about it in near future. I started on my regime. 3 months later, my HbA1c had come to 9.2 and my weight was down to 81. 6 months later, my weight was down to 68 kilograms. HbA1c was 4.1. Random sugar was 72. My BP was 110 by 70. And I was able to run up 6 flights of stairs without panting. By 2011, my weight was 69 kilograms and I was maintaining what I had regained in those times. And the same thing is maintained year after year after year. And I have finally managed to conquer my diabetes, because still my HbA1c is below 2, below 5, and my random sugar stays below 80. So this was a photograph at 59, and you are all seeing me now today in this side, this on the speaker box, and that is me at 63. So how did I bring about this change? Morning breakfast, seasonal fruits. Only fruits, nothing else. With a black coffee, no milk and no sugar, the same as I'm drinking even now. Typical daily lunch is oilless grilled chicken and salads. Green salad being the mainstay, and about 110 grams to 115 grams of chicken only. 1 apple at 4 p.m., 1 pear at 7 p.m., and night food only green salads. This regime reversed my triple level coronary blocks, reversed severe diabetes for which I was taking 24 units of insulin per day, made me lose 35 kilograms of weight, reduced my pulse rate from 116 to 72, brought down my diastolic BP from 96 to 76. Finally, I was released from prison, and when I returned to Bungalow, after winning all the legal battles, I saw many patients waiting for my return. Patients were still waiting despite the newspapers and television buggering up my reputation. But the patients cared a damn, and despite a 13-year break, from the next day of surgery, next day of my release, I started operating. Nature was kind on me. My experience in the art and sculpting probably made my fingers more accurate. And to my luck, I attracted only complex and unusual cases. Nature has helped me so far, as I now learn to respect nature. So, immediately after that, the newspapers carried another news saying doctor does 11 surgeries in a month after 13 years in prison, which again shocked the Tamil Nadu Medical Council. And then they wanted to get a clarification, which eventually has been sorted out. In the last 6 years, I specialize in complex and referral cases only. Presently, I do revision arthroplasties and Ilizarov surgeries only. Since then, I have designed ultralight Ilizarov rings, written 11 books, and more are coming. These books are famous internationally and are being translated into other languages. The previous book, Atlas of Orthopedic Surgical Exposures, is now being translated into Spanish, German, and Chinese. A new book on non-operative fracture management has become very, very popular, and the legend Augusto Sarmiento himself is a co-author of this book. With a few like-minded orthopedic colleagues, we have established an Indian Academy of Orthopedic Surgeons, which is a non-commercial, academic, and teaching organization only. Our prime aim is orthopedic teaching and education. Each print book is released as a free PDF after 1 or 2 years by IOAS. So every time a new edition comes, the free PDF of old edition is uploaded on the net for everyone. We learn in life as we teach. Each day I learn many things from my colleagues and friends, whom I have gathered into many WhatsApp groups. Our team now run or manage 64 WhatsApp teaching groups with around 12,000 orthopedic surgeons from 65 countries, many of whom are listening to this talk. We also give surgical DVDs and techniques and conduct workshops and conferences. And this is one of the 4-month online course which the IOA is conducting. In addition, we are also conducting a course on hip arthroplasty, biological methods, distal sodium channel blocks, Miros technology, and hip arthroplasty. Gradually, our work is being recognized internationally. You can see Divakar's Alpha 1 portal is being spoken about in one international conference, and they have also put my face on that. We are now planning for a museum of orthopedic implants, which the Indian Academy of Orthopedic Surgeons will host, which will be a place to visit for most orthopedic surgeons who love it. Look at the course we are now conducting already has got so much of acceptance that the message like this makes our life happy. Good morning, sir. This is my first Ilizarov, as I never assisted any Ilizarov surgery. In a 15-day-old distal radial fracture was managed somewhere else with massage and crepe bandage. I just followed the steps of magical 3-wire concept of respected Prakash sir. Patient was operated yesterday and now being discharged today. She was able to take her morning tea with the operated limb. Huge respect to Dr. Prakash sir. You can see on the right the pre-operative and the post-operative X-ray and the patient functional having her tea with the frame on her hand. As we near the end of the conclusion course, I just want to summarize my conclusions for you today. Number 1, it is not where you are that matters. What you do matters. They can take away your liberty. Only you can take away your freedom. They can imprison your body. Only you can imprison your mind. A physician is never off duty. He is there 24/7, 365. So whether you are in a prison or a farm or on the road or a stand, when you see a patient, you have to jump and treat him. And be a scientist so that you find your research material wherever you are, even if it is prison. Keep meticulous records. You never know when they'll be useful. In these days of digital records, convert your manual records to digital and keep data and documentation with you, because documentation, and more documentation is the ideal key to learn and teach. Keep smiling. No trouble lasts forever. We all get troubles. We must know to get out of it and get on with life. More than 85% fractures can be managed conservatively with excellent results. This is a carry-home message for us today. Let us not allow commercial research to convince us otherwise. Procedures like PFO should be tried out in properly indicated cases before rushing into arthroplasties, unicompartmental or total knee replacements. We must achieve synergy with nature, assisting natural healing, rather than compete with it and bypass nature. Thank you very, very, very much for this last lecture. I will now stop sharing, and Dr. Divakar and Dr. myself will now continue to address you, and we can spotlight Dr. Divakar. Add spotlight. Yes. Now I have lost the earlier messages. So if there are any questions, we have another 10 minutes for question answer session. We have
Prakash,
over 60 participants. Please unmute your mic and ask your questions, please.
So this
Prakash,
really
Yes,
is
can I ask you?
yes, Dr. Shah, please.
Wonderful. Thank you very much for undoing our minds. Means of course, I do only arthroscopy, so it's a very different ball game. But as I understand that we have to respect the nature and the. I don't think that we should treat MRIs. We should treat the patients. That is one. And I wanted to ask you that now how much percentage of our practice is operating, and if you are going to operate, is it like more Ilizaro, which is helping the nature to heal, or is it like plating and bone grafting and other things?
These days, I do only two types of surgeries. One is complex primary and revision arthroplasties, both hip and knee. Because I started 25 years back doing arthroplasties, my own patients are coming back for revision.
With your
You asked about my practice?
no, with your implants, the arthroplasty.
No. Now I don't have a company, so I'm just buying whatever available in the market.
Okay.
But those implants, those knees are made by where those hips and knees were implanted 25 years back using my implant only. So now they are all coming for revision.
Have you find a lot of difference between the Indian knee implants and the foreign ones?
Proper technique is more important than the instrument in our company. And my Indian knees have performed 25 years well, whereas I've seen a tune fail in 5 years.
Right.
So if you do it wrongly, it doesn't work.
Right.
Other thing I do is Ilizarov mostly for salvaging badly managed trauma. And for that, we have a very exclusive group of Dr. Kiran Patel, myself, Dr. Vasudevan, Dr. PN Prasad, Dr. Jangid and all. And we are probably doing a very high quality Ilizarov work on an international standard level.
No, I understand. I could see that, It's wonderful. It's wonderful.
Thank you very much. Any other questions? We have a message from Turkey where Dr. Figen says that she liked the speech very much. Now, anyone else?
Hello, sir.
Yes?
Sir, I am Dr. Rakesh, sir.
Yes?
Sir, I have a small doubt regarding pain portal block, sir. So for one patient, I've given cocktail injections, sir, where I mixed steroid and xylocaine with
Yes.
distilled water. Unfortunately, the patient had a discharging sinus from the where I've given the injection, sir.
What was the condition for which you gave the injection and which was the portal?
She came to me with sciatica, sir. Sciatica. I've given beta 1, 2, 3 blocks, sir.
Okay.
Unfortunately, beta 3 block got infected and she's having a small discharging sinus from that location.
It is very, very rare and unusual if you use strict aseptic precautions, you use gloves and you clean with betadine and spirit. Dr. Divakar has given maybe thousands of injections. I have given hundreds of injections. We have never seen this problem. The possibility is the syringe you purchased was not sterilized by the company. It was a local Indian syringe. Without even sterilizing, they put it in a packet and told you that it's sterile. Or the gloves might have been unsterile, or your cleaning might have had some defect. No, because it's like an injection abscess, we are not to be worried much. All we need to do is give some antibiotics and it should settle.
one thing more I'd like to add, Dr. Prakash.
Yes.
That every needle has got a bevel. And whenever we inject thrust to the skin, a small piece of skin is cut by the bevel of the needle and it enters the hollow of the needle. And whenever you go and inject, it is injected. And all of us are knowing or not knowing that our epithelium or dermis, it contains flora. and the flora has seen all the antibiotics you know or used. So it is highly resistant flora we harbor on the skin. The small piece cut is injected inside the skin. Same thing happens when you invert the edges and suture. You are exposing inside of the tissue to the highly resistant flora. So whenever you inject steroid, you are reducing local resistance. Where you are cutting a piece of dermis and injecting inside skin with every needle you thrust. So I developed a separate technique. Either you make a small cut in the skin with a sharp 10 number knife and then inject through the normal tissues, non-infective dermis, or you take some air, thrust the needle, inject elsewhere a small amount so that you inject the cut piece there, withdraw the needle inside the tissues and go to the right spot and inject the steroid. This is the best method I have calculated so far. That you cut through the skin, go elsewhere, not where you are going to reach. Go elsewhere, inject that small piece, withdraw the needle inside the tissues, then reach to the place where you intend to. That's why you can inject steroid safely at the spot you need, and you are not exposing that steroid reduced immunity area to the cut piece of the dermis you have injected through the needle.
Okay, Dr. Divakar, we have two great orthopedic surgeons from India, Dr. V.M. Iyer and Dr. Mailvahanan Natarajan. I request both of them, if they are still here, just give us your blessings and say a few words which will encourage us. Dr. V.M. Iyer is probably one of the senior most surgeons of this country, and Dr. Mailvahanan is a legend in not only orthopedics, but in also oncology. So can I please have a good word from either Dr. Mail Natarajan or Dr. V.M. Iyer, please?
Honest words, honest words.
Honest words, yes. Dr. Iyer, are you there? Oh, we have so many participants today, it's a bit difficult for me to locate them. No, I don't
Yes.
know.
Prakash,
Yes.
I'm here.
Yes, sir. Please, a few words.
Sir, please unmute your mic, unmute your video, sir, so we can see you. Dr. Natarajan, I have not seen you for a long time.
Yeah.
To see
hang
you.
on. Yes, I'm ready to show myself.
Good. There we go.
Okay.
One minute. Let me see. Where is
Yes. How's that? Well, I
Well,
have been a.
I'll just see you and I will.
Yes. Can you see me?
One minute. Not only I'll see you, I'll add a spotlight for you. Wait, Dr. V. Iyer.
Can you hear me, Prakash?
Yes, I can hear you.
Yeah, that's right. So it was a wonderful thing. Though I was familiar with most of the things, but then it was a very good revision. It was very presented excellently. Congratulations. Yeah. It is good for so many other people to hear about this. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Iyer. Thank you very much.
All my blessings to you.
Thank you. Thanks for your blessings. We are all very happy to be blessed by the two senior surgeons here. Now, if you don't have any further questions, we will close the meeting for today. Have a nice Sunday.
Sir, may I ask you a question, sir?
Please.
Sir, very good morning. And thank you for that wonderful talk. And you have amazed us always. And bringing the younger surgeons like me towards the nature. And I have been never met you, and I would like to meet you and learn a lot of things from you. And just one small question, sir. When to convert this below elbow cast?
Below elbow cast is converted. Above elbow is converted to half cast after the fracture is sticky in 4 weeks. We have Dr. Mail Natarajan with us. Please unmute Dr. Mail.
Yes.
And say a few words to us.
Well, I've been a very good friend for Prakash for more than 2 decades, I must admit. I always
Three
used to
decades.
appreciate
3 decades.
3 decades, yes. And I used to appreciate Prakash with so much of multifaceted personality, with so much of talent. In whatever he does, he used to be the best, and he used to show a very, very unique sense of finesse. And that's why you can see him. He's made some portraits of me. He's given me some models, and his approach with the pets, orthopedics, surgery. I mean, it's innumerable talents he has. And I was always a great fan of his. Prakash, I always am your admirer and a good friend of yours. Thanks for everything.
Thank you
Okay,
very much,
bye.
Dr. Mail. Thank you very, very much.
Okay.
Prakash, I cannot agree more with Dr. Divakar that you are a Leonardo da Vinci of Indian orthopedics, you know. Oh, my goodness. I would love to have one of your sculptures, you know.
With me pleasure. It will be a pleasure.
The only question is, how did you manage to get the material in the jail?
Oh, jail, if you pay bribes, you can get everything.
Okay, okay.
And my poor sister was the one who was funding all my extravagance in the prison.
Okay,
To whom
okay.
I'm very, very highly obliged and grateful. Okay, thank you all very much. We have taken a long time.
Hello, sir.
OSSCon has
Sir,
started. Yes, any
Good
question?
morning, sir. I have
One last
a
doubt, sir.
question.
Yes, one last question, please.
Hello.
Hello,
Yes,
sir.
please.
Sir, can you hear me, sir?
Yes, we
Yeah.
can hear you. Tell me, please.
Hello.
Sir, we have been trying your portals since first time it was announced in the conference in Chennai, sir.
Yes.
And so one thing we have done for the last 50 odd cases is we have started using ropivacaine in addition to lignocaine. And we have seen that these patients, they don't come back at least for 6 months. We have not, we are doing as a part of a study. And so we thought, okay, we'll have at least numbers before we present or say that this is working out. So I just want to have your inputs and Divakar sir's inputs on this.
It is an excellent idea, I think, and I think if it really prolongs the duration of DSCB, there is something that has to be tried. Dr. Divakar and I will also try to add it in our regimen, and once we can compare notes, we should be in a position to publish better. Meanwhile, if you have something interesting, impressive, please make up a paper and submit for publication in a peer-reviewed journal.
Yes, sir.
Good morning,
Sir,
sir.
thank you. Thank you.
I have another query. If
Yes.
you can allow me. So I would like to second with that person who has said that he has used ropivacaine. Even we are using ropivacaine, and we are also getting prolonged results with sodium channel blockers.
That is what Dr. Kore has been telling me for a long time.
Yes, sir.
And he also showed me a variant of this which had imported from USA
Okay.
for $500 for 20 ml. And that seems to have effect for 12 to 18 months.
Oh, great.
Wow, great, sir.
So let us see, but Dr. Divakar feels that it is not the local anesthetic effect that causes the DSCB block.
Mechanical.
The effect is
neurological.
cannabinoid receptors, and these DSCB blocks are not the DRG related or related to the nerves per se. It has to be in the vicinity of the nerve, not near the nerve or neurovascular bundle. And he feels that even as little as 0.3% xylocaine gives him prolonged and sustained relief. I have seen that in younger patients, the relief lasts dramatically, and probably one injection makes it all right. For elderly patients, comorbidities, obese, and other associated conditions, the effect seems to be short-lasting. In trauma, we need to repeat every 5 days to 7 days. So only plain xylocaine should be enough and adequate, because we may have to do remanipulations or recasting or small things, and we are only giving for pain relief.
Yes, sir.
Whereas in neuropathic and myofascial conditions, we must learn to discover more concoctions and cocktails, which will certainly prolong the effect of the injection from few weeks to few months.
So my another question is regarding the extension casting for humerus fractures.
Yes.
So we have been using it, but the most common thing that we were finding difficulty is with the angulation that is occurring at the fracture
Varus
site.
angulation is common because of the muscle imbalance in the arm. Chanley had always suggested arm chest strapping to avoid varus angulation. Me and Divakar now are planning for a newer protocol where we will just we will put an alpha 1 block and keep the arm close to the chest, and we will strap it with adhesive plaster for a week or 10 days. At 10 days, when it becomes sticky, we will convert it into an axilla to lower wrist cast in extension, supination or pronation depending on the fracture pattern. And in 4 weeks, when it becomes sticky, we'll convert it to an arm cylinder or a Sarmiento brace. So this is a newer protocol which Dr. Divakar and I are developing.
Okay.
And Dr. Divakar gets more humerus patients than me. So he'll be the first to tell us. And in addition, he's also found a new portal which is at this level around the border of the trapezius, which is a portal for humerus. When I gave a talk, I specifically told you that we do not have a portal for fracture humerus. But Dr. Divakar has actually found a portal, and I will ask Dr. Divakar to come here and explain his scalene portal or trapezius portal for fracture shaft of humerus.
Yes. Actually, we were lacking this humerus portal. So I tried my old trusted trapezius block, which I was using for cervical. So I started actually what I keep on adding portals every 5 minutes distance. First I inject suppose beta 1, then beta 2, then beta 3, and beta 4 and see the effect. I see sometimes cumulative effect, I see sometimes sole effect. So this trapezius block has given effect when the alpha 1, alpha 2, alpha 3 failed. And this two portal, which was trapezius portal, it worked. Next 4-5 cases, I added this portal on. Here it was. Without any hypertension and without any problem. But one more thing I just wanted to add to all of you, that a recent case of when I given bilateral ground block, there was severe hypertension lasting 2 hours. I had to call Dr. Gore to ask for the explanation. He told me that because of severe pain, patient is having sympathetic overactivity is there, and if you block sympathetic portals bilaterally, so that means the 0.03% concentration, it affects more sympathetic than the nerves. Severe hypertension, it may follow if you are giving a bilateral block and patient is having severe pain. Here, whenever you see this thing, this is a new method of
Yes, I would like to say this correctly, as Divakar has said that it is more related to the severity of pain and dramaticity of the pain relief. Meaning, the patient had very, very severe sciatica, almost stuck with his back with major muscle spasm. Suddenly, beta 1 to 3 in both legs, and then his pain dramatically disappears. That causes some sort of a sympathetic parasympathetic disturbance. It causes a syncopal spell, leads to vasodilatation, leads to a sudden fall in blood pressure. So this is something we must keep in mind, and preferably not give too much at a given time, though it is not based on dose or dilution or duration. It's already 9:30, so we have exceeded our time dramatically. I thank all for having attended this lecture. The peak of the lecture, we had more than 140 participants, though the lecture, invitations were really limited. And we'll make a recording and post it on YouTube. If anyone of you is interested in joining any of the IOAS courses, please message me. And after this, we'll have a flexible schedule where you can take lessons at your home, at your convenience. I especially like to thank Dr. Vivek Maratha, Dr. Arvind Divakar Jain, Dr. Kiran Patel, and other stalwarts of Indian Academy of Orthopedic Surgeons who have been with me all this while, helping me to continue courses. And this lecture and the video link shall be posted for you in public domain. Thank you very much. Have a nice day. Enjoy.